The town of Red Creek had a habit of forgetting people. It forgot old factories after they closed. It forgot workers after they retired, and it especially forgot dreamers, whose ambitions seemed bigger than their bank accounts. For nearly 20 years, Ethan Cole lived among those forgotten people. His garage sat on the edge of town beside an abandoned railway line where rusted freight cars slowly surrendered to weeds and time. The building looked more like a scrapyard than a workshop. Bent metal sheets leaned against the walls. Broken engines lay scattered across the gravel. Old generators, discarded appliances, cracked machinery, and piles of mechanical parts filled every corner. To most people it was a junkyard. To Ethan it was a library. Every broken machine held a lesson. Every discarded part carried a story. Every piece of scrap represented a possibility waiting to be discovered. The locals rarely saw it that way. They called him the junk mechanic. Teenagers laughed when they drove past. Business owners shook their heads. Whenever his name came up, even customers who occasionally brought him repairs treated him like a man who had never accomplished much in life. What they didn't know was that Ethan possessed a mind unlike any engineer they had ever met. As a child, he had built working radios from discarded electronics. At 15, he had repaired farm equipment that professionals couldn't fix. At 19, he earned a scholarship to study engineering, but when his father suffered a devastating accident, Ethan abandoned college to support his family. Years passed. Responsibilities multiplied. Dreams shrank. Eventually, the scholarship disappeared. The university moved on and Ethan remained in Red Creek repairing tractors, generators, and old engines. Still, he never stopped learning. Every night after work, he studied advanced engineering textbooks bought secondhand from online auctions and library sales. His small office contained shelves packed with manuals on aerodynamics, thermodynamics, propulsion systems, materials science, and robotics. While others watched television, Ethan filled notebooks with calculations. While neighbors slept, he experimented with designs inspired by problems nobody around him even knew existed. He had no laboratory, no investors, and no prestigious degree hanging on the wall. All he had was curiosity and determination. One rainy Tuesday morning, a customer arrived with a broken industrial compressor. The machine had already been examined by 3 repair companies, all of which recommended replacing it entirely. The customer reluctantly left it with Ethan. 3 hours later, the compressor was running better than when it had been manufactured. The repair required a custom component. Ethan fabricated himself using scrap metal and parts harvested from discarded machinery. When the customer asked how he had done it, Ethan simply smiled and said, "Machines talk if you know how to listen." Word spread, but not in the way Ethan hoped. Instead of admiration, many people interpreted his skill as a strange obsession. They viewed him as an eccentric mechanic who spent too much time digging through junk piles. They couldn't understand why someone so talented would remain in a forgotten garage. Even Ethan occasionally wondered the same thing. Yet deep inside, he believed his opportunity would eventually arrive. He just didn't know when. That opportunity began with a storm. Late one evening, thunder rolled across Red Creek as powerful winds battered the town. Power outages struck several neighborhoods. Emergency crews worked through the night trying to restore electricity. Near midnight, Ethan sat alone in his garage testing a prototype energy system he had quietly developed over the previous 3 years. The device combined salvaged components, custom-designed circuits, and an innovative energy storage mechanism unlike anything commercially available. It wasn't pretty. Wires snaked across metal frames. Recycled parts protruded from every angle. But the system worked. As the town plunged into darkness, Ethan's workshop remained illuminated. The prototype automatically activated and powered the entire building without interruption. Ethan carefully recorded performance data, unaware that a utility engineer monitoring the outage noticed something unusual. Every building in the area had lost power except one. The anomaly was logged and forgotten. At least for the moment. Because hundreds of miles away, a completely different group of engineers would soon become interested in unexplained anomalies, innovative energy systems, and a mechanic whose greatest inventions were hidden beneath piles of scrap metal. And when they finally walked into Ethan Cole's garage, the world would never look at the junk mechanic the same way again. The morning after the storm, Red Creek returned to normal. Shop owners reopened their stores. Utility crews packed up their equipment, and residents complained about spoiled food and interrupted sleep. Ethan Cole returned to work as if nothing unusual had happened. He repaired a grain harvester before breakfast, rebuilt a damaged hydraulic pump before lunch, and spent the afternoon fabricating replacement parts for an aging factory machine that manufacturers had stopped supporting years earlier. To anyone watching, it looked like another ordinary day in the life of a mechanic who spent his time surrounded by rust and scrap. Yet inside his garage, hidden behind stacks of discarded equipment and old tool cabinets, sat the energy prototype that had quietly outperformed modern backup systems during the storm. Ethan knew it was special. For years he had studied energy inefficiencies in traditional storage systems. Batteries degraded too quickly, fuel generators required constant maintenance and fuel supplies. Existing solutions solved one problem while creating another. Ethan believed there had to be a better way. His prototype wasn't just an emergency power source. It was a hybrid energy management system capable of capturing, storing, and redistributing power with remarkable efficiency. Most engineers would have needed a research team and a multi-million-dollar budget to build something similar. Ethan had done it using discarded industrial components, recycled metals, and countless nights of trial and error. The problem was that nobody knew it existed, or so he thought. 3 days after the storm, an engineer named Daniel Mercer sat inside a regional utility company's monitoring center, reviewing unusual grid behavior recorded during the outage. He wasn't investigating Ethan specifically, he was simply curious. One data point kept appearing in the reports: a small property on the edge of Red Creek that had shown no interruption despite a complete local grid failure. Daniel initially assumed it was a recording error. Then he checked again, and again. The numbers remained unchanged. The building had operated independently for nearly 7 hours, while neighboring facilities lost power. That wasn't impossible, but it was unusual. Daniel made a note and moved on. A week later, another strange event occurred. A manufacturing plant outside town experienced a critical machinery failure. The repair estimate exceeded $200,000. Replacement parts would take 6 months to arrive. Production was expected to stop indefinitely. The company owner, desperate for a solution, contacted Ethan as a last resort. Most experts had already declared the machine beyond repair. Ethan examined it for less than an hour. Then he asked a simple question: "Can I redesign the failed section instead of replacing it?" The executives laughed. One even told him, "If real engineers couldn't fix it, what makes you think a junk mechanic can?" Ethan didn't argue. He simply went to work. For 4 days he barely slept. He studied every blueprint, measured every damaged component, and built entirely new replacement assemblies, using materials sourced from scrapyards and abandoned industrial equipment. The company executives expected failure. Instead, the machine restarted on the 5th day. Not only did it function, but performance improved by nearly 20%. Engineers hired by the manufacturer couldn't explain how Ethan's modifications had increased efficiency. The local newspaper covered the story briefly. Most readers treated it as a feel-good local article. A few engineers paid closer attention. One of them forwarded the article to a professional forum. That forum reached another, then another. Within weeks, discussions appeared across engineering communities about an unknown mechanic solving problems that trained specialists considered impossible. No one knew much about him. No degree. No patents. No corporate affiliation, just rumors and photographs of a cluttered garage. Many dismissed the stories as exaggerations. Others became curious. Meanwhile, Ethan remained unaware that his name was slowly spreading beyond Red Creek. Every evening he continued working on personal projects hidden from public view. One project occupied most of his attention. It was a compact propulsion system concept he had been developing for years. The idea had started as a thought experiment after reading aerospace research papers. Over time, it evolved into a functioning prototype assembled from salvaged turbine components, custom machined parts, and countless hand-drawn calculations. The device sat beneath a tarp in the back corner of the garage. Visitors assumed it was scrap. Ethan preferred it that way. The fewer questions people asked, the easier it was to focus. One Saturday afternoon, while sorting metal components outside the garage, Ethan noticed an expensive black SUV parked across the road. It remained there for nearly 20 minutes. Then it drove away. The same thing happened 2 days later, and again the following week. At first he ignored it, but eventually curiosity got the better of him. The fourth time the vehicle appeared, Ethan walked toward it. Before he reached the road, the SUV accelerated away. No explanation, no conversation, just disappearance. For the first time in years, Ethan felt that someone was watching. Not out of hostility, out of interest. The feeling intensified when unfamiliar emails began arriving. Some came from engineering firms asking technical questions. Others requested consultations. A few offered employment opportunities. Ethan declined them all. He wasn't looking for a job. He was looking for answers. For years he had pursued ideas that nobody around him understood. He believed many of his concepts could change industries if developed properly. Yet without resources, support, or access to advanced facilities, progress remained painfully slow. Still, he kept working. What Ethan didn't know was that far beyond Red Creek, a team of aerospace engineers had recently encountered a problem that resisted every conventional solution. The challenge involved energy efficiency, thermal management, and propulsion optimization. Hundreds of experts had examined it. Millions of dollars had already been spent. Progress remained frustratingly limited. Then one engineer stumbled across an obscure forum discussion, mentioning an unknown mechanic who rebuilt industrial systems from scrap, and somehow made them perform better than factory specifications. The comment seemed ridiculous, but curiosity has a strange habit of opening unexpected doors. And within a few weeks, that curiosity would lead several of the most brilliant engineers in America directly to Ethan Cole's garage. The visit would begin as a simple conversation. It would end by changing his life forever. By the beginning of autumn, the rumors surrounding Ethan Cole had grown far beyond Red Creek. What started as stories about a mechanic repairing impossible machines had evolved into something much larger. Across engineering forums, professional discussion groups, and private industry networks, people were quietly talking about the man who seemed capable of solving problems that entire teams of specialists struggled to understand. Most dismissed the stories as exaggerations. Some assumed the reports were fabricated. Others believed there had to be a hidden team working behind him. The idea that a single mechanic operating from a cluttered garage could outperform highly funded engineering departments simply didn't fit the accepted narrative. Ethan, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware of the attention. His days continued exactly as they always had. Customers arrived with broken equipment. He repaired what others couldn't. In the evenings, he worked on personal projects that few people ever saw. The garage remained crowded with salvaged parts, old machinery, and half-finished prototypes. To outsiders, it looked chaotic. To Ethan, every object had a purpose. One evening, long after sunset, he stood beside the covered propulsion prototype in the rear section of the workshop. Over the years, the machine had become something of an obsession. Countless redesigns had transformed it from a rough concept into a sophisticated experimental system. Ethan wasn't trying to build a rocket engine. He was attempting to solve a fundamental efficiency problem that existed across multiple industries. The design involved advanced thermal recycling principles, energy recovery systems, and airflow optimization techniques he had developed through years of independent research. The problem was that he had no way to properly test it. Professional laboratories cost money. Specialized equipment cost money. Everything required resources he didn't possess, so he improvised, as he always had, using salvaged sensors, recycled electronics, and custom-built monitoring equipment. Ethan created his own testing environment. The results were encouraging. Every modification improved performance. Every experiment produced new data, yet he knew the project remained incomplete. What he didn't realize was that several hundred miles away, engineers at one of America's most advanced aerospace facilities were wrestling with remarkably similar challenges. Their project had consumed years of research. Teams of experts worked around the clock. Computational simulations ran continuously, yet progress remained frustratingly slow. One afternoon, during a technical review meeting, an engineer named Dr. Rebecca Lawson presented a collection of unconventional solutions gathered from independent researchers and industry innovators. Most were quickly dismissed. Then she showed a photograph. The image displayed a cluttered garage. Scrap, metal, tool cabinets, stacks of machinery, and in the background, partially hidden beneath a tarp, an unusual mechanical structure. Several engineers immediately recognized design characteristics. Not because they had seen that machine before, because they had spent years studying similar concepts. The room became silent. "Where did this come from?" someone asked. Rebecca explained the rumors surrounding a mechanic in Red Creek. The response was laughter. A junk mechanic? Working alone? Building advanced engineering systems from scrap? It sounded absurd. Yet the more they examined the available information, the less absurd it seemed. Technical descriptions from various reports demonstrated an unusual level of understanding. Repairs attributed to Ethan showed engineering creativity, rarely encountered even among elite specialists. Most importantly, several documented modifications had produced measurable performance improvements that nobody could easily explain. Curiosity replaced skepticism. Within days, background research intensified. The deeper they looked, the stranger the story became. No patents, no academic publications, no corporate partnerships, no public recognition, and yet evidence suggested extraordinary technical ability. Eventually, a decision was made. Rather than speculate further, they would simply visit him. A small team was assembled. Officially, the trip was described as an exploratory consultation. Unofficially, it was an investigation. Nobody expected much. At best, they hoped to meet a talented mechanic with unconventional ideas. At worst, they expected to discover a collection of exaggerated stories built around local folklore. The following Tuesday morning, Ethan arrived at his garage shortly after sunrise. The air was cool. Fog drifted across the abandoned railway line. Birds perched on rusted freight cars. It felt like every other day. He unlocked the workshop, rolled up the main door, and started preparing for work. About an hour later, he heard unfamiliar engines approaching. Not trucks, not local vehicles, something different. 3 dark SUVs slowly entered the gravel lot. Ethan wiped grease from his hands and stepped outside. The vehicles stopped. Doors opened. Several men and women emerged. Their clothing was professional. Their posture confident, their expressions serious. None looked like customers. One woman stepped forward. "Mr. Ethan Cole?" Ethan nodded cautiously. "That's me." She smiled politely and extended her hand. "My name is Rebecca Lawson." Ethan shook it. Then she delivered a sentence that completely changed the course of his life. "We've come a very long way to see your work." For a moment, nobody spoke. Wind rustled through nearby weeds. Metal clinked somewhere inside the garage. Then Ethan glanced toward the visitors and noticed logos embroidered on their jackets. His eyes narrowed. He looked again to make sure he wasn't imagining it. Because standing in front of his scrapyard garage were engineers from one of the most respected aerospace organizations on Earth. And somehow, they were there to see him. The visitors spent several moments silently studying Ethan's garage. Their eyes moved across piles of salvaged machinery, shelves packed with components, workbenches covered in sketches, and half-disassembled equipment waiting for repair. It looked nothing like the research facilities they were accustomed to. There were no spotless laboratories, no multi-million-dollar testing chambers, no advanced manufacturing systems. The roof leaked in one corner. The concrete floor was stained with decades of grease. Old fans rattled overhead, and yet, almost immediately, the engineers noticed something unusual. Nothing in the garage was random. Every shelf was organized according to purpose. Every machine had been modified. Every tool appeared customized. Even the discarded components had labels attached describing material composition, mechanical tolerances, and performance characteristics. Rebecca Lawson exchanged a glance with another engineer. This wasn't the workshop of a hobbyist. This was the workspace of someone who thought like a scientist. Ethan noticed their expressions. "You probably expected something different," he said with a small smile. One of the engineers laughed. "Honestly, we expected less." That answer surprised everyone, including Ethan. The group spent the next hour examining repair projects scattered throughout the garage. One engineer became fascinated by a hydraulic system Ethan had redesigned. Another studied a custom cooling mechanism built from recycled industrial equipment. The deeper they looked, the more questions they asked. And the more questions they asked, the more impressed they became. Ethan explained concepts casually, often solving complex engineering problems on a white